Hi, my name is Matthias and welcome to a new tutorial. In the stereo series, we have so far only looked at one side of the coin. How to create stereo information on mono sources, but in a mono-compatible way. Now it's time to go the other way around. In most modern music, we do not have to deal much with mono sources. Most samples we use, or the output of virtual instruments, already contain tons of stereo information, often even too much. So let's have a look how to tame sounds when they go too wild in the stereo field, and result in sounding ugly when listening to them in mono. I chose a Reese Bass as an example. I use Vital here because it's easier to demonstrate and to follow for you guys. But the same principles you can apply to Citrus or Hammer. A Reese bass is at the very end nothing else than a bass pad made out of detuned saw waves. There are many interpretations that affect the subsequent processing and thus the final sound, but the basic principle is the same in all of them. I set oscillator 1 an octave lower, raise unison to 7 voices, and lower the unison detuning to 15%. Oscillator 1 is already routed to filter 1. In this example I choose the analog 24 dB low-pass filter. Cutoff to about 30 semitones, resonance to 0%. To get a bit more movement, I set a longer decay and 0 sustain on envelope 2. And drag it onto the cutoff slider to assign it. I set the modulation depth to about 30 as well. The number of voices to 1 and a bit of glide. Finally an EQ, where I cut out a little bit of the mids and boost the lows. I like the sound in general, but there are several issues with this sound. When I turn this sound to mono, I lose quite some volume. While the stereo version moves around the -9 dB mark with some spikes towards the -6 dB. The mono version moves more around the -12 mark, with some spikes around the -9 decibel. But this isn't all. When I play a longer note, watch the bass region of the sound in the spectrum analyzer. The low region is dancing around like crazy. We got here volume differences up to 6 dB, which means that the bass is partly just half as loud as in the louder parts. This isn't anything we can accept for a bass. We cannot risk losing half of the perceived loudness at times. We must somehow restrict this behavior. This isn't a mono-making issue either. It happens in the stereo version as well. So mid-side EQing doesn't help here at all. If I take out the low end from the side signal, this dancing around of the lower frequencies stays unaffected. The reason for this unstable frequencies is the unison detuning. The single voices are slightly out of tune and placed differently in the stereo field. This causes a constant drift in and out of phase. When the voices get closer being in phase, the signal gets louder as their values being added to each other. But when they are getting more and more out of phase, their values subtract from each other and the signal gets quieter. For unison sounds, this is a wished behavior and gives this typical character. For the bass frequencies though, it kills their purpose completely. This is a problem we have to fix at the source. We must somehow avoid the unison effect on the lowest frequencies, and there's indeed a quick and easy to use fix, which you can apply to all unison sounds if you wish this typical sound character, but keep the fundamental, the tonal bass, more stable. I duplicate this track that we can compare the differences we make. In the new version, I open the editor of my saw wave with this little pencil icon. In the lower region of this window, we have the whole sound splitted into its partials and phase relationship. This is, for example, the same if we go into Citrus, into the Oscillator tab, and convert the shape to sine harmonics. In Vital, we have this power scale, which is shown by default, or we can switch to the same amplitude scaling we have seen in Citrus. Now we take out the fundamental and the first harmonic by simply dragging the bars to the bottom. The waveform doesn't look like a normal saw wave anymore, and by playing the pattern we see something like a high-pass filter effect. Everything below 100 Hz is lacking now. To bring back our lower frequencies, I activate Oscillator 2, set it to the same pitch as the other one, and choose a sine wave here. A sine wave consists just out of the fundamental and doesn't have any overtones. However, I reduced the saw wave by 2 tones, the fundamental and the first harmonic. As the sine wave just consists out of the fundamental, I have to add the first harmonic manually. Here the power scaling comes in handy, as I just have to drag the new tone to the same level as the first one. The amplitude scaling shows afterwards the more familiar picture, with the fundamental being the loudest. I leave the routing at the default, as the second oscillator is too low as it could be affected by the filter, and don't do any processing which isn't necessary. This is how the second oscillator is sounding on its own. Perhaps it's better to set the phase random of the sine to 0% to avoid nasty clicks. And all together now. Our sound is back to normal, and even better. The low end is stable now. No dancing around anymore of the lower frequencies. Let's compare these two basses, and please have a look at the low end and the correlation meter, which indicates how monocompatible a sound is. Please remember, everything going towards the -1 region is bad. The more it stays towards the +1 region, the more compatible the sound is. First we have the original bass, then the modified one. To me, the modified version sounds more powerful and stable in the low end. The biggest work is done, and the correlation meter already showed a quite good result. But let's see how we can improve it even more. The key to fix monocompatibility for very wide sounds is mid-side processing, especially mid-side EQ. The settings vary depending on the sound, but there are some general rules. As lower regions have more slower moving wave cycles, while higher frequencies move faster, what makes phase issues in the low end more noticeable than in the upper range. Because of that, it's always a good idea to keep as much lower frequencies in mono as possible. So I play the sound, move the high-pass frequency upwards until I really hear that it's taking away parts of the sound. I can go easily up to 300 Hz without hearing any bigger change. Once you've reached a point where it becomes noticeable, just dial it back a bit. I decide for 250 Hz, but that's as well a matter of taste. Just make sure that you cut off at least everything below 150 Hz. This is essential to keep your low end safe from any phase issues when being played back, for example on a PA system, which sums this region to mono anyway. But everything upwards falls more into the creative decision. Set it to taste, but make always sure not to overdo it. Second, I want to enhance frequency regions in the mids I find important and good sounding. To compensate for the loudness boost caused by these changes, I lower the similar frequencies in the sides. And other way round. In the highs you can go wild with the stereo field, so I bump up the sides here a bit. Compared with and without the EQ, the original sounds wider, but less stable as well. In mono though, it's a difference like day and night. Turning off patcher makes the sound much quieter and thinner sounding, while the treated version stays on the same loudness level like the stereo one and doesn't lose its power when summed to mono. However, we lost some width in the stereo with our treatment, but this is easy to fix. I just raised the output volume of my side EQ a bit. This brings back lots of stereo information, but as the sides disappear anyway completely when summed to mono, this change doesn't make any difference for the mono version. To recap, this is where we came from. To our modified version, which plays nicely in mono as well. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this little tour. The procedure for treating stereo sound which go too wild is mostly the same. Fix at the source whatever is possible. Take care for a stable fundamental. And enhance the frequencies in the mids, which are important for this particular sound. To compensate for loudness, lower the same regions in the sides, where you take out as much bottom end as possible without destroying the sound though. Raise the overall side volume to bring back more stereo information. Have a great time, stay tuned, and thank you for watching.